Hey, how you getting on? Today on I Don't Know What to Do with My Hands TV, I have the great honor and the great privilege to introduce you to the brand new thing from KHE Audio, the ZMX Automatic Impedance Matcher. ZMX, I'm so messed up I can't even remember which is British and which is American English anymore. Me fail English? That's impossible. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let me start this video off with a little rant. I believe we're living in the golden age of gear right now. I don't think it's ever been easier or more affordable as a guitarist to get a decent tone. If the tools available now were available 20 years ago, I can't even imagine where I'd be right now. I mean, we have an endless list on decent sounding plugins to choose from. There's a plethora of modelers out there that sound great and are very affordable, but there's been a lot happening in the analog world as well. Like the reactive load box, that was a game changer for me. A reactive load box in combination with digital aspects like IRs really blew my mind back in the day, and it really changed my perception of guitar tones. But one of my favorite pieces of gear that has been gaining in popularity over the last few years is the amp switcher. And I don't think I'd even have a YouTube channel without an amp switcher. My very first videos were very heavily dependent on amp switchers. That's where I compared a few diesel amps. And even today, probably 95% of my videos contain some form of amp or cabinet switching. And about 1.5 years ago, I upgraded to what I consider the king of the amp switchers, the KHE system. Now, don't get me wrong, there's several great amp switchers out on the market. They're designed by engineers that I greatly admire, but there's a few things that set the KHE system apart from those. One is that it's an actual switching ecosystem. KHE have amp switchers for every need you might have there. They have combination of amplifier and cabinet switchers, different sizes of those. They have effect switchers, they have cabinet switchers like the one down here. And most importantly, is a system that can grow with your needs. These systems that KHE make can be linked together. You can stack up to 15 different of their switcher systems together, link them with MIDI, and have them work as a switcher array. So if you really wanted to and you really needed to, you could link up to 15 of their 8 amplifier switchers together to have a switcher array that allows you to switch 120 amplifiers via MIDI if you wanted. And that's probably almost enough to switch all of Cal Bull's amplifiers. But there's one first world problem left for me that this system hasn't been able to help me with yet, and that is speaker impedances. You see, there's two dominant speaker impedances on the market. You can get 8 ohm speakers or 16 ohm speakers. And even if there only were one speaker impedance on the market, there's 4x12 cabs and there's 2x12 cabs. And the way they need to be wired up, that results in different overall impedances. So typically you'd have an 8 ohm cab, a 16 ohm cab, or a 4 ohm cab. And with tube amplifiers, these need to be matched. You need to match the output impedance of your amplifier to the input impedance of your cabinet. Otherwise, you could have problems. There's a lot of discussions on the internet about impedance mismatches and safe mismatches and unsafe mismatches. One popular analogy I keep reading and hearing about impedance mismatches is to think of the cabinet as a glass and your amplifier as water. So you want a bigger glass than the amount of water you have. So you'd want a higher impedance on your cab than the output on the tube amp for a potentially safe mismatch. So a 16 ohm cab connected to the 8 ohm output of your amplifier is typically considered as a safe mismatch, but it's still not recommended. Now, I recommend you check the manual of the amplifier because opinions differ on that. Some amplifiers might be sensitive, their design might not be as stable, and you might fry the output transformer of that anyway. So don't go around saying that your second favorite ball guy on the internet has been telling you to do that. I wouldn't. And I've been avoiding mismatches. One mismatch you should definitely avoid is having a lower impedance cab connected to a higher impedance output on your amplifier, because that configuration causes higher current draws, which can potentially damage your output tubes, output transformers, and cause all kinds of expensive sounds and smells. Just don't do it. So theoretically, I could set all the amps to 8 ohms, which I have, and use all these cabs, even the 16 ohm cabs, because that would, in theory, be a safe mismatch. But I don't really want to do that because I'm a little OCD. I don't want expensive failures, and potentially mismatches like that change the tone as well. So my first world problem has been whenever I want to use a 16 ohm cab, I have to pull the amplifiers out, kind of get my hand behind there, find the switch or the different jack, hope I got the right one, look at photos on the internet how it looks, still get nervous, pull the amplifier out halfway anyway, stick my head in there, bump my big bald head, get annoyed, find the right output, and then do the test. And that's where the ZMX comes in, because this thing automatically matches impedances. So no more messing around at the back of the amps. With this thing in the attenuator loop of your primary KHE switcher, this thing only works with KHE switchers. It's set once and forget. Let me show you. You can connect either the 16 ohms, 8 ohms, 4 ohms, or 2 ohms output on the back of your amplifier, and 16 ohms, 8 ohms, 4 ohms, and 2 ohms cabinets. If you use the dual cab mode of the KHE switchers, once you set each individual cab, it even automatically balances out impedance mismatches. So if you want to connect an 8 and a 16 ohm cab at the same time, it will automatically match that to the corresponding impedance of 5.3 ohms and all the other weird mismatches you could go to as well. It only has 3 buttons: a global bypass button, which has some functions I'm going to show you in a bit, a button to select your respective cab impedance, and a button to select your respective amp impedance. On the back, it only has 2 connections, in, out, and the MIDI connection. This thing doesn't need a power supply. It gets its power from your primary amp switcher in the array, or if you just have one, just your amp switcher. You just use a high quality MIDI cable to connect the power and control connection here to the control in of your primary KHE switcher. You also have to connect the load lines, but I'm going to be making a short video for KHE's website where you can, learn how to connect this thing up properly. So let me just pop this back in here, and then we're going to set it up. Righto, I've already set this up for my setup here, but I want to walk you through this once again. So I'm going to reset it. I'm going to hold the bypass button and power up my switchers, which resets it. There we go. So as I said, I have my ACS 4x4 as the primary switcher, and that is linked to the CSX8 here. As you can see, the LEDs for the cabinets are slightly lit. That means it's detecting load on those cabinet outputs, and the KHE switchers won't let you switch to any unsafe configuration. All the cabinet outputs have load sensing. My CSX is not connected to any cabinets at the moment because I've recently changed my setup. Only the CSX is connected. So what I want to do here is select one cabinet, and you can see the ZMX-1 is blinking. I'm going to select my amplifier 1. I've got 4 amps and 4 cabs selected. Obviously the ZMX is complaining because nothing is set. All my amps here are set to 8 ohms. And you can see it remembers that configuration. Cab 1 is my Marshall cab, which is, 8 ohms. Cab 2 is the Mezzo, which is also 8 ohms. Cab 3 is the tall vintage Marshall, and cab 4 is the 1960B in the corner, which is also 16 ohms. And now it remembers all the configurations. I've got a MIDI floorboard connected here, and even when I switch that, oh, obviously we didn't do that configuration, which is, yeah. And even if I turn off my switcher now, the ZMX-1 will have remembered the configuration I was at. As you can see from the green LEDs. Maybe a few more words about connections before we get into the demo after all. The ZMX-1 needs to be in the attenuator loop of your switcher or your primary switcher, which needs to be activated. And to do that, you just hold the control button for a little bit on your primary or your only switcher. And you can see here, it blinks once, which gives us the setup menu. There's a few functions. I think 1 is recall mode. 2 is, I think, dual cab mode. This is ground lift. And this is the attenuator loop. The attenuator loop needs to be turned on for that. You can see it's on here. Turn it off. That's something I forgot at first. If you don't have the attenuator loop on, you might get some weird results. I had a few volume jumps, but with the attenuator loop activated, everything works as it's supposed to. Hold the control button a bit again, and we're back in normal mode, where it remembers all the settings. So what do I want to do? I've got a guitar ready here and I just want to try the ZMX. I want to switch to the cabinets that are connected to it. I've got a pair of Sennheiser MKH 8020s as room mics over there. And I've got two of the the cabinets close mic'd. One 8-ohm cap, the Mesa Boogie, with one SM57 on the dust cap of V30. And the same for one of the 16-ohm caps, the Marshall Tall Vintage here. Because I want to try out how the bypass of the unit affects the tone, because through the bypass on the ZMX-1 we can still mismatch if we want to, and in its normal mode it will also be in the circuit when amp and cabinet are matched, I believe. And there's also a version where you can bypass it if there is a match. By holding the bypass for 2 seconds it lights up yellow. That means when amp and load impedance are matched, this thing will automatically go and bypass, but I don't want to do that yet. I want to switch that off for the moment. And if we go and bypass, the LED is red. So yeah, let's just start off. I'm going to start off with the Marshall cab. That's number 1 here. The Mesa Boogie is LED number 2. The Tall Vintage is LED 3. And the Marshall 1960 is LED 4. And it's amazing to see or to hear how different the Marshall cab sounds to the Mesa Boogie cab, even though both of them are mostly loaded with vintage 30s and 8 ohms from the early 2000s. The Marshall cab sounds entirely different from the Mesa Boogie cab. Interestingly enough, that might have to do with the fact that the Marshall 1960 AV is blasting me right from the side here. The Mesa Boogie sounded closer with the 8 ohm speakers to the Marshall Tall Vintage with the 16 ohm speakers than those two cabs. But then again, that might just be my perception in the room. So I've talked far too much in this video. Anyway, let's just see with the close miking on these cabs how the bypass affects the sound, if at all. So I'm going to switch to the Mesa Boogie cab first. That could be a placebo, but I think it affects the sound very slightly. There's a small difference, or it might just be the switching sound. I'm not too sure. Let's see how it reacts to a 16 ohm cab where we will be creating an impedance mismatch by switching in the bypass. There's a much bigger difference there, even though I'd find it hard to describe now. I'd have to listen to the tracks in post. There's a slight volume jump as well when the ZMX goes in bypass and creating an impedance mismatch this way. Let's see, I've only got room mics if it's the same on the Marshall in the corner. Yeah, there's a slight difference in volume, which will skew my perception in the room with regards to the tonal change, but I'm pretty sure there's a slight tonal shift as well. I'll be listening to the tracks in post and form an opinion then. You tell me in the comments what you hear. Yeah, just set this, I'm going to set this in auto bypass because if I don't need the circuit, I'm not going to use the circuit. There's also a mode where you can set it in bypass for transistor amplifiers because transistor amplifiers don't need matched impedances because they don't have output transformers. At the same time, you can leave it in. You don't have to bypass it for transistor amplifiers because the switcher system and the ZMX don't hurt them. That is one thing that sets the KHE system apart from some other amp switches on the market. You can pretty much connect any power amplifier up to the KHE system, Class D, floating ground. Is that a thing? Is that what it's called? Anything really. It won't damage the switcher. It won't damage the amplifier. So, yeah. Cool beans. So, yeah, this fixes a huge first world problem for me. No more messing around behind the amplifiers anymore. I can just use them as is, plug into the 8 ohm out or set the switch to 8 ohms, set it and forget it. I am stoked. I forgot to mention in the intro that this needs to be considered a sponsored video. KHE sent me this unit and I'm keeping it because it's awesome. It's going to make my life here in this studio a lot easier. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Was this a unit you might use? I think it's pretty cool. I'm stoked. So I listened back to the recordings and with the 16 ohm cab at least, there is a slight tonal difference with the ZMX in and out, but that is when it's compensating for an impedance mismatch. So when it's translating between the 8 ohm impedance of the amplifier and the 16 ohm impedance of the cabinet. And you'd expect a tonal difference there because the impedance mismatch should actually create a different tone. But it's not earth-shattering. It's minor in my opinion, but that's not really what this is about. What this is about now and what makes a big difference here, which takes a huge worry off my mind, is now I can pretty much operate all my cabinets connected to my KHE switching system safely without having to worry, what did I set that amp to? What impedance is that cabinet again? I don't have to think about that anymore. And that's amazing. I love that. That for me personally is a bit of a game changer. I know that word it's a bad word in the meantime. My bigger YouTube friends get a lot of flack when they use that word, but I don't care. I know this is a niche product. I know amp switches are a niche product and this is a niche improvement for a niche product, but I don't care. This really improves my workflow and I'm really grateful for it. It's a custom auto transform with several different taps to compensate for all kinds of impedance mismatches. It handles up to 150 watts and you might be wondering why does it need to handle power? It's a switcher. It actually transforms the power. There's a transformer in here. All the power is actually going through this, so it will have to be rated for a certain wattage. And it even says at the back here, this is not a load box, this is a switcher, consult the manual. As usual, the guys from KHE have thought this through. And that really shows. You can really hear and feel how well this is built. The relays in here are real heavy duty relays. There's a real reassuring heavy clank when they switch, which I didn't expect to enjoy so much, but every time I push the button and the relays go clank, 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 I think that's cool. It's just clever engineering. And I'm an engineer. I come from a long line of engineers, so I've been pretty much spoon-fed this kind of stuff ever since I was a little kid. This just makes me happy. I'm stoked for this. It comes with rack ears as well, which I'm going to be putting on this. Yeah, I'm keeping this. I forgot to mention that in the intro. I guess this has to be considered a sponsored video. Keeping this, I'm not giving this back. I've already got a bigger rack case for this. This is going in here. The Behringer preamp is getting the curb. That's just in here as just to fill up the space anyway. Anyway, I'm going to link to KHE's website where you can check out all the switchers and the ZMX-1. You'll hopefully find a video from me there as well, outlining how to connect this to your switchers in the correct way. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you very much to KHE for sending the ZMX-1 to me and making my life a bit easier. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.